Y'all, I am so excited for our guest today, Dr. Brett Winchester. He was not only my mentor and colleague, but he is one of my friends, and he is also an industry disruptor. And we are going to just have a little conversation and talk about some things going on, some things we wish you all would know. So this is definitely going to be one you want to save and go back to and send to all your friends. Let's do this.
The goal here is to learn how to treat your mind and body like a professional athlete. Welcome to Mind Your Body. I'm Dr. Audra Lance. I'm a doctor of chiropractic who specializes in treating sports and non-surgical injuries, anything that involves muscles and joints. I treat big-name celebrities and professional athletes. Most of my patients refer to me as the witch doctor because they can't explain any other way their pain was removed that quickly. I hate cooking, but I do love wine, and don't even think about giving me anything that involves ketchup because I will not eat it. Every episode of this show is designed to help you move better, live better, and feel better. Now let's go do this thing. Hello, butthole breathers. I'm here with Dr. Brett Winchester. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
And
I'm so excited just to chat about a few things with you. And I think this is a season, holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, high stress. We see in our practices a lot of more pain and just people going crazy and not being able to enjoy it. And I just wanted to dive in specific aspects with you of why you think that is, how can we help, what people can do at home, and then, we can geek out with some more of the scientific functional medicine factors.
Yeah, I think that the holidays for me I'm a goal setter. So I always use the holidays to kind of recharge my own batteries and kind of figure out what I'm going to be doing for the next year. And then I always kind of reflect on the previous year and kind of see things that I felt that I did well, things that I want to change in my life. And then, yeah, I do think it's hard for a lot of people because you're with family, you maybe not be eating as well as you could. So sometimes I think it's a good time for people to let things slide a little bit from a diet standpoint and things like that. And then, I'm just such a big fan of getting a fresh start on January 1. And I just feel like you kind of get mentally ready for that day. I always recommend people get like a really good planner and things like that. That way they can kind of get scheduled and be ready for it. Because I don't think you can just show up January 1 and be like, okay, I'm ready for the change. I feel like most people need to kind of get themselves geared up and ready to make a big change. And I feel like when people do that, they can really implement the changes well throughout the year. And I really challenge people, like you don't even have to call it a resolution, but if you're going to make a change, how do we make a change over long term? And to change things like that, you actually got to change your daily habits. So that's what we try to get them to do.
Yeah, which is hard. I mean, I don't find that incredibly easy all the time. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed with doing too many goals or maybe doing too big of a goal and not doing little ones along the way to celebrate, right? I don't know. What's your thought on that? Like, I really like having my big goal and then along the way having little checkpoints where I'm like, yeah, you're on your way. You did this.
No, I agree 100%. I feel like humans are it's really challenging for them to follow through with anything. So that's where, like, at least when it's my patients and clients, I always make them check in with me as an accountability piece. Therefore, if the wheels were to kind of fall off a little bit, I'm there to kind of, put them back on track. And and I tell them too, it's not easy, and these aren't just like little changes that we make for a week. These are like actual lifestyle changes. And I try to give them the plans to be able to do that well, which I agree. It's not easy.
What's the biggest goal you think people should change that you see most often? Like they should change and make a goal. I mean, my English is not what I majored in.
Well, I think that, lately I've learned myself getting out in nature can be really, really helpful. So I think like as crazy as the world is right now, just getting out for a 1 mile walk in nature is a recommendation I give a lot of people. So I feel like it's really helpful to manage anxiety and things like that. The other big thing is just the human diet. I mean, since I do a lot of functional medicine with my patients, if I can't get them to change their diet and I can't change human behavior, then my results can only be so good. So at the end of the day, you're not going to like out supplement or even outwork out a crappy diet. So, I mean, you got to start there.
Are you loving this conversation? Well, I just wanted to take a break and let you know that if you would like to learn more from Dr. Brett Winchester, he is coming to Nashville to do a course in DNSA. Yes, if you're a medical professional and you're interested in us shooting the shit more and diving deeper, please join us in Nashville. You can sign up. The link will be in the show notes, blackjackeducation.com. Spots are going really quick and we only have 30, so sign up soon.
And I'm a big fan of the paleo diet just because it knocks out all the inflammation out of the diet, and it's, people can research it and things like that. So that's probably my biggest recommendation, maybe getting outside in nature and working out or moving their body and then making a dietary change.
Okay, I agree, paleo. Yeah, because it's easy, like you said, and there's so many recipes and Pinterest and everything online. So what's a favorite lunch that's paleo for you, and what's a favorite dinner that's like easy?
Yeah, I think that, people make this so much more complicated than it actually is. To me, it's like every meal you need protein, you need vegetables. Maybe you want to add in some like healthy carbs like potatoes or sweet potatoes, maybe a salad beforehand. And if you can always just stick to that, then you're always fine. It's when people start trying to like get creative with like a gluten or dairy-free diet that makes it more challenging. So I feel like a salad with some kind of protein, maybe chicken, that's a common thing. Sometimes I'll make a smoothie, which would have spinach, frozen berries, protein powder, an orange, chia seeds, creatine, all that would be in my smoothie. And I feel like for a lot of people, that's just easier because they know it's all going in there and it's satiating and it's relatively easy to do. For dinner, it's the same. I've got my whole family kind of bought into the cult. So my wife is a very good like paleo cook. So she does the same thing. It's like, we got to have protein, we got to have vegetables. And that's kind of how we live our life. And it's really made it a lot easier, quite honestly.
Yeah. What's your favorite protein?
Oh, my ribeye, probably steak.
I would say if you said steak, we're gonna go.
We kind of live in we live in the Midwest here, so we can get grass fed meat, and so we're kind of a snob that way. So yeah, I think that's we always have good grass fed meat.
What's your thoughts on like the carnivore diet? That seems to be a craze out there these days.
I think that, for people who have metabolic problems, let's just take like a type 2 diabetic, it can obviously be great because you're limiting carbohydrate and sugar. Like any of those diets, they all have their shortcomings. I always like take a step back and say, well, are we really only designed to eat meat only? And I think we would find that that's probably not the case. But if you're on that diet, then you're obviously ridding yourself of sugar and excessive carbohydrate and a lot of other bad things. So I would say it'd be way better than the traditional crappy American diet. And I also believe everybody metabolically has their own diet that they do really, really well with. Like myself, I was in ketosis for 2 years of my life. And I had days where I felt amazing. And I finally at the end, I just felt like horrible. And my blood work was wonky and things like that. So, but I'll put people on a ketogenic diet that are like type 2 diabetics. They'll do amazingly well. So I just think it just really, really depends on the individual person. And I think that's why I always come back to like the paleo or the Mediterranean diet, because I feel like there's moderation built into those diets, whereas some of those other diets, like carnivore, seems a little extreme to me, although I still will recommend it. But I mean, if you look at the diets, and if you look at like Robert Atkins, who is an absolute genius, if you look at all his research, he never actually talked about the weight loss. He talked about all the metabolic changes that he was making with his patients. And he just simply ran out of time. I mean, the one thing we learned about the Atkins diet was he wasn't talking enough about consuming good fat as an energy source. And he also believed you could eat unlimited amounts of protein. So I think like for those of us who've been on the Atkins diet or the ketogenic diet, if you watch your like lipid panel, for example, you'll start to see your cholesterol and things like kind of creep higher than we would like. And you can argue whether or not that matters. I'm kind of a fan of, we look at the blood work. The blood work is basically like the gauges on your car or your truck, and you want those within a certain parameter, and then when they start to get a little bit wonky, then I always kind of ask myself why for the patient.
Yeah. And I agree with like the diabetes or, some other autoimmune metabolic disease of doing the keto or carnivore for a period of time. What, as with your patients, are you comfortable? Like how long before you're like you were saying, you were 2 years and you're feeling crappy, and everything's obviously individualized in how they feel. But is there a general guideline where you're like, oh, let's try this for 2 months or 3 months and then adjust from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think with like Walter Longo and other people in the fasting research, it if fasting was a medication, it would literally be the drug of the century. Like there is so many amazing things that you can change in your body with a good fast. So I think that like for a lot of my patients, I'll recommend, like myself personally, I always fast from Sunday night to Monday night. So every week I kind of have a 24-hour fast built into my diet. And then like once a month, I'll do a 3-day or even longer. And I feel like the research is so sound on that. And they've actually found too that Americans are so poor at changing their diets that they feel like it would almost be easier to quarterly make people do a 3-day fast or a fasting mimicking diet instead of trying to change their diet, all the time, which is really kind of fascinating. But so I think fasting's good. And as far as your question was on a starting point, I think a starting point would be like if I'm seeing someone who's relatively obese, I might start them on like literally an Atkins diet just so they can learn how to start limiting carbohydrate. And then we might go to a little bit more of a ketogenic diet. Then we're like slowly transferring into a paleo diet. And that would all occur like in a 3-month period. Or, I mean, like if we're dealing with GLP-1 agonist drugs, that's the new craze. Like we'll start them off on a really, really low dosage there and then try to like get them off within 3 to 6 months of that. So everyone's a little bit unique, Audra. That's what makes it really hard.
Right.
But those are some guideposts for you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the fun part of practice, whether they're, people are reaching out and scheduling with you at your clinic or with us. And it's just like, yeah, these are like guidelines and what the research is showing and some of what we use, but it has to be specific to you in your case. And speaking of that, what have you seen with your patients? Because sometimes I have seen when, especially females with some autoimmune stuff, the fasting might be too stressful on the body at first until we get some of that under control. Do you agree? Do you see that?
100%. I mean, I do think like not everybody can fast, and way more males can fast than females. Like my wife's a perfect example. Like she eats very, very clean, but like if she skips 2 meals, like she is literally losing her mind. So I think what you would find though, you learn a lot about the people that don't fast well. Usually those are going to be more of like our hypoglycemic patients. So if we're dealing with low blood sugars, then obviously you're not going to fast well, nor do we want you to fast. Mm-hmm. My other like subgroup would be like my middle-aged females. I do a lot of work with the medical doctors in our office and also like the Dutch testing with the hormone replacement therapy. And a lot of our middle-aged females, actually, they don't fast well either. And it really does tell me that the female hormones are reliant on calories, basically, and even honestly, carbohydrate and fiber. So there's definitely some exceptions to that, everybody should be fasting. But but I would say that's maybe, I don't know, 20% of the people, maybe less, 15%.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've noticed through my own, like,
and you don't know till you do it, like, if I fast, I feel amazing. Like, so you do a 24-hour fast and you learn a lot about yourself. And if you don't feel well, you're getting lightheaded, you're getting kind of dizzy. Those are all signs that you're probably hypoglycemic.
Yeah. I mean, through my whole health journey, I was like fast all the time. And then the more I learned, and, we're always trying stuff on ourselves, right? Because that's part of the fun and you get to see. And yeah, especially before I really healed, I could not fast at all. And now it's like every once in a while I'll do like you were saying, the Sunday to Monday, and I can handle it sometimes. But I am definitely one of those people who was not able to. Now, go back to the GLP-1.
Let me say it this way too, like if I had a catastrophic cancer diagnosis or a new diagnosis of autoimmunity or something like that, I would be on a 5 to 7 day fast immediately. Like it's that important, I feel like, for resetting the immune system and the inflammatory markers. And honestly, the research is all out there. Like it's kind of shocking to me that no one really talks about it because there's tons of good research on it.
Well, it doesn't make money.
There's no money in fasting. That's right. Literally no money in fasting.
That's why no one talks about it.
Yeah.
Back to the GLP-1 agonists. I've been reading research. You've been keeping up on it with like the microdosing. And yes, obviously it's a weight loss drug, but there are these other benefits such as like addiction, help with liver, help with hormones. Like some of my people with endometriosis, like and PCOS, they're like helping to mitigate some of that inflammation with them. And then this, obviously everyone loves to lose a little weight, but it's like a super small dose. How are you guys using that? Have you seen that with your functional med people and MDs in your office?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no like turning a blind eye to this movement because it is, I mean, everybody's talking about it. I mean, I'm in small town America and everybody's talking about it. I can't imagine like in Nashville or something like that. But no, and I think like when we dove into the research, and I mean, in peptides in general, what we don't know is we don't know the long-term, if there's any long-term problems. That's the one downside to it. I would say, though, that, when you look at research across all systems of the body, besides GI/GU, it's actually really good. And I had to even educate our staff on that because I think everyone just assumed that, like, if you're in holistic medicine, you're going to be against it. But actually, it really helps out those of us in functional medicine in a lot of different ways. So even like if you talk about the female PCOS and things like that, it gives them an early win too, so if they're really struggled with weight loss to no fault of their own, this gives them a tool to kind of get the confidence that they need to take a step in the right direction. So yeah, we'll microdose it and then we'll try to transition off the best that we can. I would say humans being humans, they always struggle with getting off of them part of it. And, that's been, if you look at Americans and dieting for the last 100 years, that's been the problem with every diet, essentially, So, and I think, like if we're looking at that PCOS like profile, like really doing a good job while they're on it of fixing the other things. And obviously one of the downsides is loss of muscle mass. So trying to, keep them in a resistance weight training program while they're on it would be another probably good idea. So no, if you look at it, there's way more research across like all systems of the body in favor than against. Every once in a while you'll find somebody will have like a GI complaint, but for the most part, people, as long as it's dosed right, they do shockingly well on it.
Mm-hmm. And we've been seeing, and I know there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that have endo or PCOS, and we've been seeing a lot at our clinic lately. You know how it goes in waves. Like you'll see a bunch of like hamstring things and then shoulders, which is just so funny. So at our team huddles, we've been talking about treating this, not just musculoskeletally, but with the functional med component, the stress component, all of that. So some of the things we love to recommend is, like you said earlier, the resistance training. Obviously, I'm a huge component of taking a walk outside in the fresh air. I mean, is game changer. And then the anti-inflammatory diet. What else do you find is a key component in also recommendations with that clientele?
I mean, I think like to peel it way back, I mean, because what everyone's asking now is why do we have so much PCOS? I mean, some people are saying it can be high as 20 to 30% of our female population now.
It's wild.
The main thought is that early onset of birth control. So I think that is that the years go on and the more functional medicine patients I see, the more I try to talk our females into getting off of birth control if possible, because it just wrecks a lot of things in the body. So that's kind of probably the cause of it. And then, I don't know. I mean, like there's miracle supplements. I mean, you put a female on 3,000 milligrams of myo-inositol, I mean, it'll change their life,
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we use other supplements like berberine to help with like blood sugar management. And we can do up to 1,000 or 1,500 milligrams of berberine. And, and then just like, the stress part, which I feel like the females, it's so hard for them right now because they have pressure to still raise their family. There's pressure for them to have a career. They're still kind of expected to do the cooking. So like they're in a weird spot right now because I feel like all the pressure goes on them. And like I'll look at some of these ladies' Dutch test and I'm like, I don't even know how you walked into this office today. And like women have this weird ability to just kind of persevere, whether it's for their kids or for, they never bitch. They just kind of, and so I've really learned to respect and listen to them well because I feel like Western medicine is not listening to them well. And it's honestly, I mean, it's like probably besides like the pediatric patient in our field, it's probably the most neglected patient that exists. And then even like in hormone replacement, they say the biggest crime in all of medicine in the last 50 years is depriving females of female hormones. So, like understanding hormone replacement therapy really well and understanding like how to use that. And it's not, we have women who have a full hysterectomy at 35 and they're not put on hormones. It'd be like taking your thyroid out and not taking thyroid medication. It's insanity.
Right. Absolutely crazy. Oh yeah. It's so funny you say that. Like when I got my Dutch test done and, I read it, but I had a couple other people read it. The one person said that, how are you working 12 to 15 hours a day right now? How are you getting out of bed? Because everything, but it is funny. And then I think this is healing in general, males, females, everyone. Like it is crazy when you make even just one of those changes we're talking about, and then you get some momentum and then possibly two to go back and be like, how did I do it? How did I feel that bad and function? Our bodies are amazing.
Yeah. When people feel like crap, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a very subtle kind of slow grow. So it happens like watching your kids grow. You don't watch your kids grow because you're around them. So, but slowly but surely, then you start like really not feeling well. And then when you start to feel good again, you're like, oh my gosh, like my brain, my body's actually doing what I need it to do. Like in my world, I can tell immediately in public speaking, like I can tell in the first 3 minutes of when I start to talk, if my brain's going to be where I need it to be. I mean, I can still pull it off if not, but like some days you're just so like on and sharp. And then other days you're not, and the days that you're not, I always try to like figure out like what I did the day before to make that happen. Maybe I had too much wine. Maybe I didn't take my supplements. Maybe I didn't work out, like there's always usually a reason why.
And once again, we're all different, but what are your favorite ways that you like have to recharge that are your non-negotiables?
Yeah. Like I always say nothing gives me more anxiety than a day off. So like a day off is for me, like working out, getting out in nature, just kind of like getting caught up around the house, doing yard work. Like to me, like just rotting on a couch is really not my style. Like I need to be doing something, but maybe just a little bit away from work. Yeah, listen to podcasts, I think like now there's so much free information out there with podcast or Audible that like if you ever need to like recharge your batteries a little bit, then I think it's so easy to do that now because there's so much free information out there.
Yeah. Diving into another hot functional medicine topic, talk about parasites. How often are you seeing those? How often are you making that part of the game plan?
Yeah, I think with the parasites, they really had their heyday like 5 years ago. And then, I mean, we're still looking on them. We look at usually the GI map is what I use, which is a stool test to kind of see like if there's worms or parasites. And then, yeah, we'll do parasitic treatment, but I do think it's a little bit overplayed maybe with my patients that come in thinking for sure they have parasites. But then, like, well, I mean, I'll have patients, they'll go to Mexico or they'll go to, some different place in the world and like they really will have them. So, yeah, we'll do medication, we'll do supplement therapy, we'll do a bunch of things, but I do think it 5 years ago was in its like peak of everybody was talking about, everyone had parasites, and now it's kind of backed off. But we'll use the GI map to kind of tell us that we see it. But the other thing might be I'm seeing a bunch of people in the Midwest that might not be traveling as much as your group might be. So you guys might be dealing more with it with water sources from other parts of the world and things like that. So yes, we do. We do see it, but I don't think it's usually the first thing that I'm looking for.
And then what about another hot topic and something people come in asking about is mold. I know we're in a little bit different climate. We're way more humid down here, but can you speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, mold is kind of that umbrella thing right now. We're seeing a lot of MCAS is what we call it, mast cell activation syndrome. And we see this with like patients who struggle with histamine, with molds and other things like that. So it's a huge problem. The hard part about treating it is like a lot of people aren't willing to walk away from their house or spend, $200,000 to fix their house. So, and then like some of the mold remediation companies, they don't do as good of a job as we would like them to do either. But I mean, one of the questions I always ask a patient is, do you know if you have mold in your house, or have you ever had water in your house before? Because that like at least gets you going on that. But I think whereas the parasites I feel like might be a little bit overrated, I feel like the mold is probably grossly understated and underrated. It's just kind of the hardest thing to kind of change. Like we have some names around here of some mold remediation companies that they can come in and they can do some testing. But then like other people can absolutely live in mold and they're totally fine. So, some people just don't do well with detoxifying mold, whether it's their liver or whether it's just they're in that category of histamine overload or mast cell activation syndrome. So we can still be treating the patient also as we try to, help them with the mold. And we usually use, I don't remember the exact number, but an array from Cyrex Labs to check mold sensitivity in the patient.
And what are you having your mold patients do? Like detoxing, like sauna, making sure you're sweating. What else are you incorporating in your guys' game plans?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you can get a lot done with 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C, some bromelain, some quercetin, some monolaurin. Those would all be maybe some supplement recommendations. And then I mean, if you have a leaky ceiling, then you don't keep mopping up the floor, you fix the leaky ceiling. So then you find a way to try to help the actual mold situation, which you'll find like the patients that are really struggling with this, they usually know where their problem is in their house, or they know what they need to do. It's just about like prioritizing their finances, and they almost need like you or me to kind of connect it back to their health. So like a lot of people are like, well, I have mold, but they don't understand how it's affecting their inner being and their wellness. So they almost need us to convince them to prioritize it. Otherwise, they just kind of they know it's related, but they have no idea how related probably.
Yeah. And I think it becomes overwhelming because like you said, financially, it's a lot. And it's just like, well, what do I do? Like, not everyone can move, or, it just seems, we get stuck in no matter whether it's mold or some even low back pain sometimes. I've had this forever. I live with it. I don't know what else to do. And like taking those steps and like having that support team is huge. What is the most common musculoskeletal condition you're seeing in your office right now?
I mean, I would say, let me change the question a little bit. So I think the thing that has really shocked me with dealing with functional medicine would be how often musculoskeletal tendon injuries are actually from functional medicine causes. So like if you have like, let's just keep picking on the middle-aged females a little bit. So you got somebody who's got really tricky lateral epicondylitis. You've done really good treatment. They're not getting better. They're not getting better. I can almost guarantee you it's either a metabolic or a female hormone problem, especially if you know you're doing good treatment on it and it's not like responding the way that we want. Plantar fasciitis would be another one. So I think like connecting those, like on my really, really difficult cases, back to what the actual cause was, which is usually needing female hormone replacement, or like maybe diagnosing like a subtle hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's disease or something like that, would be the biggest shocker, I would say, in the last 10 years of my career. Obviously, we see, of course, a ton of back pain and stuff like that. But I mean, I think that would be the biggest surprise, I would say, in the last 10 years of my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just because it's like putting all those pieces together, because everything influences and works together. It's not everyone's, of course, when you roll your ankle, that's fine. But some of these other things, it's like there's multiple layers to everything. How about then diving a little bit into perimenopause? I feel like that's also a thing that, people keep brushing under the rug, not talking about and not addressing as part of, these people's treatment plans.
Yeah, no, I think that, and what's hard is because the analogy that people use, it's like a ketchup bottle. So like when around perimenopause, you have these moments where you have nothing, and then you have just like where everything squirts out. So in a weird twist of irony, everyone just assumes you have low estrogen or progesterone, but like you actually have like these spurts where you can have moments of high and low, and then it literally fluctuates by the day. So, yeah, it's always challenging in those moments. But like when they, everyone's talking about the blue zones now. So the blue zones, when the women are going through menopause, they don't have like these drastic hot flashes, like these moments of depression and anxiety and things like that, like other places in the world do. So I think that, you're back to getting everything internally healthy. And then, I mean, we can use supplements like Vitex would be a good one, Chastaberry, or other ones that can really like help people with these things. So, yeah, supplementation, and then understanding if we do need to use hormone replacement therapy. So they found in women that are low in estrogen that, as they move along in their life, like by the time they get to 60, a lot of times it's too late at that point. It'll still benefit from it, but it's a little bit late. So when you get to 60, you're leaving yourself susceptible to cardiovascular risk. Your brain is actually smaller if you're estrogen deficient, Alzheimer's disease, osteoporosis, osteopenia. So there's like a lot of women around this time that would benefit from like good testing, maybe with a Dutch test or even in the serum, because that way they could actually start hormone replacement. A lot of times the new recommendation is actually to start it way earlier than what we thought previously.
Which is at what age for the people listening, or range?
I mean, it would depend on the window. I mean, obviously you're dealing with a window of like 45 to 50 or 55. So, I mean, it could be as early as 45, depending on the female. But again, we never guess on this. And that's where like female hormone therapy is really, really strange, because no other system of the body do we just say, hey, take 0.5 milligrams of estrogen, see how you do. Like there's more of an exact science to it, So, but that's how they do it, So it's kind of a weird twist of irony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, us females, we're so complicated, huh?
It's way easier to be a man. I will say that. Yeah.
Definitely. And then how often is it with every case? Is this kind of like a fun case study I've been doing over the years of like correlating how much some of these chronic pains, like neck pain, yes, of course, there's the functional med, like you said, and the root cause and all that. But I've also been seeing there's a stress component of like, we're correlating, hey, where is the flare up? And, we're going through our tests, our DNS tests, and everything's clearing. And you'll get 90% better, and then they'll have a little flare up. And it's really fun diving into people's lives of like what's triggering. And it's not only bad stress of like something going on, but it could be like, oh my gosh, I just got a promotion at work. So excited. And you ride those happy hormones for a little while. And then that come down, they're like, oh my gosh, this is back just a little bit. Do you see that correlation with the stress cortisol cycle as well?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I mean, stress is like the secret. It's like kind of the secret killer, honestly. Yeah. And it's the hardest thing to address with people, because you can convince people to work out. You can convince people to change their diet. The other thing is some people just attenuate their stress way better than others. So, I mean, you could have theoretically the most stressed out person in the world, and they can be managing their stress well because they have, they internally handle their stress well. or you could be dealing with somebody who, appears to have zero stress in their life and they're internally just raging a fire inside. So it's a weird twist of irony, because just because somebody isn't working like this, high powered job and running around and, doing traveling a bunch, that doesn't mean that they're not stressed out. So I see that a ton on even like our stay at home moms, for example, would be a good example. Like they can have a ton of internal stress, and people are looking at them like, well, what could you be that stressed out about? But really, it's the internal environment that creates that. So saying the right things to them, not offending them in any way when we talk to them, and giving them goals and the usual things. And I think too, just like hearing them and listening to them and hearing their story, because a lot of times they are under a ton of stress in a lot of different ways,
and the hormones and everything all in conjunction with. So what is
I don't, Audra, I don't have words to describe like people who are struggling with like mental things. If you could just fix their functional medicine profile, how oftentimes that would change their life. It's just kind of hard because it's not the norm in Western medicine to make all those changes. We're looking for a quick fix. We're looking to take medications. People are a little bit lazy. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why this is hard to implement across a mass of people.
Oh, for sure. And people just don't want to change their diet. Like, oh, absolutely not, because it's just too overwhelming for them. So then you're in a little bit of okay, well, I can't want this more than you, and we're only going to get so far without doing this.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I feel like Annie O'Connor, and the expert in the world in chronic pain, she makes the patients orally say, I'm 10 out of 10 ready to make a change. So before you start working with somebody, you'd be wise to get them verbally committed, because if they're not 10 out of 10 ready, there's no way you're going to make all these changes that we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely not. What do you feel like, in the past couple of weeks, you're walking around the clinic saying the most to people, patient-wise?
I feel like I'm like, because I deal now with a lot of people like on difficult things. I feel like the thing that I'm telling people a lot is that I'm proud of them, because I feel like it's so hard to make some of these changes. And like in our world, we know all this stuff, so it's relatively easy. But if you take a layperson who's willing to like basically overhaul their life for you, like it's really impressive, honestly. So I find myself telling my patients a lot how proud I am of what they've been able to do. And I feel like that helps to build confidence in the case. So that's probably my biggest piece of the biggest compliment I give people, I would say.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love how you kind of said that you do it too. And saying you're proud of someone it's like, I think people forget to celebrate, the little things and take those moments to, life can be hard. Like it sucks sometimes to just, okay, tap yourself on the back, tell someone you're proud of them, do something fun. And that is such a component to healing in itself, instead of grind, grind, grind. Oh my God, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. Oh my gosh, I didn't eat perfect that day, but just taking those moments to celebrate and be proud of yourself.
Yeah, I think I mean, we're all living it right now. I just feel like even when things are going really well in your life, it's hard. I mean, it is so hard in every way, especially like those people that are like out kind of changing the world, and they're running around like crazy people. But I feel like life right now, for a lot of reasons, is really hard for people. So I feel like, to make a change on top of everything kind of being hard is even more impressive, really.
Oh, I totally agree. I just had this random thought, because I know you travel over and teach and speak in Europe, and I was just over there on tour. And one thing I noticed is, over here in the States, we're all walking around with water bottles, chugging water all the time, blah, blah, blah. They don't over there. And like, even when you go to dinner, the glass is like this big for your water. Here, it's like, here, what do you think is the difference?
Yeah, I think like Americans are so funny, because I feel like 5% of Americans are doing better than everyone else in the world at like living well. And then 95% of Americans are like way, way down the line, and I feel like in Europe, they're better at moderation than Americans. Like Um, I mean, you could go to somewhere in Europe and someone's having a glass of wine in the morning, which an American would judge, and then in America, we'll have 15 beers at night and think that's okay, so I think like probably the moderation piece, I feel like Europeans probably haven't yet got as sucked into technology as we have. They're more likely to walk. They're more likely to hang out with their friends. The one thing with the blue zones we're learning that's important for longevity is like at night, hanging out with your friends, having wine, like not just like in the Midwest, we're really bad about just laying in a recliner when we get older.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you go to Florida or you go to Arizona, you'll see people on a random Tuesday night drinking wine together, dancing, having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is probably things that certain pockets do well in America and Europe does really well, just like the communal relationship piece probably.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I mean, what better than having a great conversation over a glass of wine? That just, that sounds so great.
Oh my gosh. We look forward every night for that. Exactly.
Speaking of, I know you're a wino like me, especially red wine. What have you been pouring in your glass most often these days?
Well, we went to Portugal this summer, so I've definitely been on a kick of like trying all kinds of different Portuguese wine. Um, my wife loves Cabernet, so she gets mad if I bring anything else but that home. But I'm always kind of tinkering a little bit just to try to get better at my wine tasting. Went to Total Wine this week, got a bunch of Italian wines. So yeah, got a Barolo and some.
Did you get a Brunello?
No, I got a Barolo, but I do like Brunello.
Yeah, I've been on a Brunello kick lately because I know we were really cab the last time. But so good. And what about working out? I feel like that's a question, obviously, I get all the time. They're like, should I be doing, these group fitness classes, HIIT workouts, strength every single day? And once again, I think it depends on who you are. But are you like, go hard every day? Do you like the moderation of strength a few times a week and just make sure you're walking outside every day? What overall, as an umbrella, obviously, depending on what's going on, do you recommend?
Yeah, I think it depends on your personality. I'm like such a habit ritual person that I almost need it in my life every day or else I'm not good at doing it. So, and I'm not a good person to ask to because I have access to a gym at my office all the time. So it's easier for me than it is for most people. But I try to do resistance training every day for like 50 minutes and then also do some kind of cardio training. So that could be riding my bike. That could be going on a 1 mile run. So I try to, if I can, include those two things every day. But I feel like when you're busy, you'll naturally build in days off. Like yesterday was a good example. I just didn't get around to working out yesterday. So that was my day off. It wasn't planned to be a day off, but it just happened. Mm-hmm. And then, that's kind of been what I've done over the last 20 years. And it's really worked well for me. And then I will lift, I lift heavy weights. I just don't do high reps usually. So, and I believe in, the 5 fundamental movements or 6 fundamental movements, which is push, pull, lunge, hinge, and lift and carry. So all my workouts are going to consist of those 5 or 6 things. And then I just vary it all the time. So, and it's really served me well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of that, like we're saying all these things that are ideal and everything. And someone listening, and I know I get this all the time, is, okay, how do I balance all of this? I am so busy and so stressed out. And right now in this season of my life, like I can't let anything go or cut anything out, but I do want to make some of these changes. Like, what is your advice to them?
I think maybe like stacking 2 of your things together in a day. Most people are like learning or trying to educate themselves or maybe listen to a podcast. So while you're spending 50 minutes working out, you could be listening to a podcast, for example, instead of listening to music. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of like double down on your time there. And I think that, Americans will treat their cars better than they'll treat their bodies. So some people just need to be reminded on how to prioritize that you need to commit to treating yourself well. And then, a lot of people just need that talk because they don't even think of it that way. Mm-hmm. So working out is one of the major things you can do to make yourself healthier. Change of diet would be another one, trying to control stress. all these things, would be wise if we could improve in those areas.
Sleep, huge. How much are you talking about it with people?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I skipped my bike ride this morning to get caught up on sleep. So I think that, most people who are in the ultra longevity space, everybody's kind of realizing at the same time, literally, how important sleep is. So I think for most people, like, the very bottom amount would be 6 hours. Most people do well with like 7 to 8 hours. And then I was listening to a professional CrossFit the other day on a podcast, and he was saying he can't function without at least 10 hours of sleep, which seems excessive, but I think everyone kind of has their thing. And then, people have kids, they have dogs, they have crazy schedules, they have early flights. So, it's nothing's ever perfect. I think you just do the best job you can. But to answer your question, 1/3 of your life is spent sleeping. So obviously we need to prioritize it and make sure that we're trying to do the best job that we can to get good sleep.
And that's a good reminder going into the holiday season with, hey, I know we have these late parties and all this stuff, but we need to put it on top of our list. And what would you, going into the holidays and stuff, with the busyness, with, the temptations of food, what are you saying to people at the end of the year here?
I mean, I'll start with our family or myself. I mean, we always try to keep it gluten and dairy free. So, we'll go to my in-laws' house, for example, and she'll make gluten-free and dairy-free pecan pie that will like change your life. It's so good, So, I mean, you're still eating a bunch of sugar and I would still classify it as a cheat meal. So you're having a cheat meal, but you're also kind of still, trying to somewhat stay healthy. Or like they'll make gluten-free stuffing, which is like really good. I can't tell a difference with, gluten-free bread and things like that. So we'll bend the rules a little bit, but try to always respect, maybe being gluten-free, dairy-free. That's for us. For other people, it could be let yourself completely fall off the wagon for a meal and then pick yourself back up. That's not if you don't have issues, that's not a bad approach either. I think like most people though, they'll take Thanksgiving to New Year's Eve literally and just go like everything just goes to complete hell. So, pick your little cheats, but then get yourself right back on track.
Yeah, no. And I think that's a really great advice. Is there anything else that, is blowing air up your skirt, as you say? That's one of my favorite sayings of yours, that you want to make sure our butthole breathers hear today?
I think that, in this ultra longevity space, you have people that, in my opinion, are just idiots that are saying they're going to live to be 160 and things like that. Even 120 is probably far fetched, but what can you do? Like if you're middle-aged, you're doing a lot of things well now to make 60 to 90 good. I think people don't realize that. They wait till they get to 60 when things are kind of, getting off track before they're willing to make a change. Because if you look at statistically, as long as you wear your seatbelt and as long as you don't smoke, you'll live to be 60. There's outliers and accidents, of course, but by and large, everyone gets to 60 statistically. So then you're doing all these things to make 60 to 90 really well. And I think people don't do a good job of thinking of their life that way. They're thinking of just like the moment, or they get to be 60 and 70 and then they want to start making all these changes after they have a catastrophic diagnosis. So trying to like say the right things to them at an earlier age to convince them to change. And that's like one thing I've learned, if you're going to be good at functional medicine, you're going to have to be good at changing human behavior. Because if you can't get people to change, then it doesn't matter how much you know or what you know about blood work or supplements. Like if you aren't able to say the words to inspire them, none of it matters, So throughout the day, a lot of times I find myself literally being a life coach, just like trying to convince people to get themselves healthy. That way, they're not laying in a nursing home when they're 75 years old, not knowing who they are,
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's great. And that's like a mic drop. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here and talk with us. And I can't wait to see you soon for a glass of wine.
I know. Bye, Audrey. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Now, if you want to do something really special for me and got a lot out of this episode,
go leave a 5-star written review of the show on Apple Podcast. And if you're a Spotify listener, just tap the 5 stars. To submit any of your health questions to the show, simply DM me on Instagram at Dr. Audra Lance. And don't worry, all your questions will be kept strictly anonymous. So send me all your embarrassing questions. And don't forget, breathe into your butthole. Toodaloo!